It's been called the mood of 2021. What is it? Languishing. Never heard of it? Well, you might be feeling it. It's not mental illness, but it's not really wellness either. My next guest is a fan favorite, back to help us with all our 2020 postpartum ailments. She has over a decade of experience treating mood disorders, and her specialty is helping clients put a name to their problems without having them become their problems. And today she's going to clarify what languishing is and how we can move through it. People lifter, community thought leader, professional listener, Megan Stodard. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me back. You are like the ultimate introducer.
Thanks. Maybe I'll figure out a way to make that a thing.
You should. You're really, really good at it. No, it's a special thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I like doing it. So last time you were on the show, shout out to episode 58, you were talking about kind of the difference between depression and sadness. Right. And so I think my first question is languishing like kind of like depression? I mean, what is it?
Right. There's some overlap there.
Okay.
For sure. That sense of apathy, that sense of lower motivation, just that blah feeling. So it might have that same feel to it. But you know how we talked about that continuum when we were talking about sadness and depression? That is going to be something we talk about today too, with figuring out where does languishing sort of fit in that continuum. Maybe we'll just jump in there.
Yeah. So you're talking about when you were talking about sadness is a part of depression, but when you experience sadness for, I think you said 14 consecutive days, then from a clinical standpoint, then it's considered depression.
Right. We're sort of crossing over there. Right. So when we're talking about languishing, if you kind of visualize this continuum where all the way on the left side is mental illness, right? Like we have really poor mental health all the way on the left side. In the middle is going to be that languishing thing. And then all the way over on the right side, that is like optimal mental health. That's where we get into that flourishing. Some people call it flow, right?
Yes. Okay.
So do you have that visual where languishing is like, it's just that sort of blah in the middle?
Yes.
Right? Where there is no diagnosable mental health condition, but there's that sense of blah and meh. I don't have meh. That's it. That's totally it. And you know what? Like, maybe you read a bunch of articles about this, but that is almost a standard part of the definition now.
Wow.
Meh.
That's interesting.
Right?
Okay.
And it's that thing that when we're talking about how do we define this, it's kind of the best way, right? Like, let's not even go into a clinical definition. Meh. We've all felt it. You've been there, right?
It is a very accurate, like easy way to explain it. Like, oh, I feel meh, I feel blah. And when you explained it as like the opposite of flow, that really clicked for me too. Because when I feel in flow, it's like, okay, I got energy, I got focus, I have purpose,
right.
And I have hope.
Right.
And I feel all those things together, and meh or blah, definitely the opposite.
And what is interesting about that comparison is that on the outside, you might be looking the exact same, right? You might be doing the exact same things when you're in flow and flourishing as when you're in meh and languishing, right? You're still going through the motions, checking off the boxes. This isn't, the depression side where I might be in bed and can't get up and get going. I'm going to my job, I'm doing all the things that I have to do, but I don't have a sense of purpose or joy about it when you're in that languishing. It might look the same to everyone around you. Well, yeah, she's knocking it out, doing all the things, but you're right, it's missing that internal sense of creativity and purpose that we would be like on that right side of the continuum.
So if languishing were a cartoon character... Okay. On the spectrum.
Here we go.
Here's ready for the analogies. Rolling up the invisible sleeves. Would it be Eeyore or Droopy Dog?
This is good. I think it's Droopy Dog.
Okay.
Yeah, like you're saying, yeah, I feel great about this, but nothing within your being looks like that.
Has anyone ever told you, like, I am happy, and you're like, tell your face?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's that sort of dulling, right? We're not to numbing, where we're not feeling anything, but everything's sort of dulled.
Is this at all related to grief?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Right. And you know what? I think that there's sort of this transitional thing that's happened. I mean, let's just talk about, I mean, when we talked before for the previous episode, we were right in the middle of grief phase pandemic, right?
Yeah, because it was October of 2020. So It was like past March where everyone was like panicked and they all had that like energy to lock themselves in their house. And then we were like, it'll be done in the summer. And then we were past summer.
Yeah.
And for, a lot of Americans, that meant, their beaches were closed or wherever. They just had a lot of limitations they didn't think they would still have.
Right. And so now, after months and months and months and months of this, it's almost like that intensity of the anxiety, that intensity of the grief has sort of taken this mental toll where many of us aren't necessarily feeling that level anymore, but it's almost like we have now settled into a languishing, right? Like we're not having that same intensity of anxiety. We're not having that same depth of grief. So now it's this meh. Right.
So how many of your clients are experiencing this? Is this pretty much across the board?
I think it's so across the board. And I would say it's not even only my clients. I mean, I'm seeing this walking around on the faces of so many people. So yeah, I mean, it's not only limited to what I'm seeing clinically. I mean, I'm seeing this when I go get a coffee. I'm seeing this when, you're waiting in line at the grocery store, right? I mean, just this sense of people are kind of doing the next thing, but there's a disconnect.
So I think a lot of people would be able to say, oh, meh, yep, that's me, I'm languishing. But there are groups of people that are slightly disconnected from maybe being able to name their feelings. So if anyone has someone in their life that, they're like, well, I'm definitely languishing, but is my mom languishing or is my spouse languishing? What are some signs and symptoms aside from meh? Like, excuse me, sir, are you meh?
Right.
Like,
yeah. It's hard to put a finger on that, right?
What are some outward signs that someone could identify someone in their life is in a languishing state?
Sure. It's a little bit hard, right? Because like I was saying earlier, a lot of times these are the people who are still doing all of their normal things. So it might look a little bit like everything's fine on the surface. But you can feel that sense when you're with somebody that there's a dullness there, or there's a lower level of energy, sort of that going through the motions. You're right. Some of us are not as in tune with that in ourselves, but I think if we slow down for a second, you can feel that difference, right? When you're still doing all the things that you have to do, but there's just a lack of joy there. There's a lack of purpose. It's that sense of, I'm still doing all of this, but why and what's next? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, when they talk about like going through grief and being in a depressed state, from what I've read, it's not recommended to make big decisions. So languishing, should we not be making big decisions?
Ask it again.
So when you are in grief, you're grieving the loss of a loved one, or you're in a depressive state, you've had 14 or more days of consecutive sadness. I've read that it's not advisable to make big decisions.
Right.
Don't break up with someone. Don't get married. Don't buy a house.
Sure.
So is languishing also a state in which we should not be making life-changing decisions?
Sure, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Because I think that the thing that has brought on this sense of languishing is our sort of stuck point in making changes in places that we can't really make changes. So it is really smart to start small, actually, and then sort of see where that leads. I think sometimes we do feel this sense of like, I've got to really shake this loose. I've got to really fix this. But a lot of the things that are causing what you're feeling are outside of you. And we have, I think, led to this languishing because of all the energy and trying to fix those things outside of us. Right? I mean, month after month after month of things that aren't necessarily solvable, are out of our control, are uncertain, and we've had so much of our focus on those that we have sort of spiraled into this place of languishing in that kind of messy middle, right? Where we may not really be the picture of optimal health, but I'm still doing the stuff that I need to do.
Right.
See? Like, isn't that good? Isn't that good?
So it's almost like our decision-making powers are fatigued because we're trying to
Absolutely.
fix and hold on, and kids in school, not in school. Oh, someone got sick. Even today,
Right. Perfect
the reason
example.
that we are recording here in her beautiful office is because someone on the team was exposed to COVID.
Right.
And so we had to completely change our recording schedule, but this episode still needed to happen.
Yeah.
So here we are. But I could see where that would fatigue one's decision maker.
Sure.
So you're saying,
and I mean, today's example is just one small example.
Totally.
Right? In a series of, right? If that was the only thing that you had happen in the past
Right.
18 months, you'd be like, no big deal.
Right.
But you're right, there's that fatigue of one thing after the other, constant adjustment.
so you're saying, like, as far as big life decisions, maybe aside from those that are absolutely required of us, which is like the things I just listed that
Right.
affect our daily lives, to make smaller life decisions instead of making larger ones, hoping it will jar us into a state of joy and flourishing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's like really bringing that focus down to the micro, right? When on the macro, so many things are out of our control and that we can't choose, and we can't necessarily make a big change or decision there. But it starts small because that's meaningful, right? When we're, excuse me, when we're so focused on trying to make those big changes outside, we're losing sight of our own self-regulation in the context of all of that. So, sometimes those small actions that we can take when we're shifting out of trying to solve all the big problems of the world into, okay, I'm going to slow down and appreciate something small in my day, it can feel a little bit menial. It can feel, and people tell me this all the time, well, that's not going to fix the problem. Right, it's not. That's not the point, right? The point is that we're shifting out of fix the problem mode because we've determined this might not be one I can fix or solve. So we've got to shift out of that into self-regulation. How am I going to care for myself through this thing? And yeah, those are the small things that don't fix it, but they can drastically improve our experience of the it, whatever that is.
Oh,
does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And when you said about the smaller decisions being more accessible, I don't know why, but I immediately thought about traveling. Traveling is often a way people will refuel themselves. But I, recently took a trip, and it was a lot of planning because it was Alaska. And after that, I was told my husband, I understand now why people choose Tulum, which is a resort area in Mexico, or they choose Disney World, or
right, you show up,
or a cruise. Sorry, cruise people, I just don't get it. But because it's all planned for you, so it's less decision fatigue. Right. But talk to me about stress loop. What does that mean, and how is that a part of languishing?
Right. So essentially every stressor that we experience, every threat that we're under, whether that's a physical threat, a mental, emotional threat, or, in any uncertainty that's going on in our life, which many of us have had all those, that's a threat, that's a stressor. And so essentially every single one of those individual threats, puts your body and your mind kind of in an alarm state. And to some degree, when we can't close the loop in our normal way that we would, which is often, I have a problem, let me fix the problem. Oh, now I feel better. Oh, stress loop closed, right? How many things have we all experienced I keep saying it, but really the past 18 to 24 months that it just doesn't work like that, right? We can't just solve the problem, stress loop closed, solve the problem, stress loop closed. Oh, I feel better, I feel better, I feel better. All of these things are left unresolved, uncertain, or we think they're resolved and then they change, like our recording today.
Yeah.
And if we are always focused on solving the problem to relieve our stress related to that, then we're leaving all of these loops open. It's almost like every stressor is an open tab on your browser. And so
I immediately went to an amusement park and I was like, it's like whack-a-mole from hell. Because it's not one dang mole at the same time.
They're all there.
It's like they all are like, we're all here at the same time. You can't whack us all.
Yeah. Right. That, the browser, whatever. But all of these are just left open. And so again, that leads us into that mental toll of languishing, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm feeling all of the physiological and emotional stress of all of these open loops all at once, because I can't solve them, I can't fix them, and so they're just open. We have to really dig in deep here to intentionally shift gears from problem solving to regulating, right? And that's a whole different approach. And those are the things that sometimes feel like, well, that's not going to fix anything, right? Well, it's like, yeah, because it's a thing that's not fixable or it's out of my hands, right? So to shift into sort of training our own self-regulation to close each of those loops, it shifts from solving the problem to caring for yourself and resetting that alarm each time, right? Because now, if we're not doing that, okay, yeah, we've got whack-a-moles or we've got, all the browser tabs open, but really it's like, okay, now we have 500 commercial level fire alarms going off all at the same time. One is quite a lot, right?
Yeah. So it sounds like, if I'm understanding you right, like languishing is like low level functioning.
Yeah.
And it's
functioning,
mm-hmm. but at a low level, and it can become depression, or it can become something that is more classically categorized in the mental illness bucket.
Living and languishing puts us at higher risk to move further on that continuum. Right.
And it sounds like it's a constant stress on the autonomic nervous system too. Like you're in constant fight or flight, but it's like when you work in an office where the fluorescent lights buzz all day, you don't notice it.
You almost don't even notice.
Until you come back from your vacation and you're like,
oh, what is that noise?
That needs to be fixed.
Yes.
So instead of fixing the external, it's working on, not fixing the internal, but what would be a better word?
I just love that word, self-regulating.
Regulating.
Right? It's sort of bringing that back down to a place of calm every chance that we have to sort of close that loop, manage what we can, and move to the next thing. Otherwise, you're carrying all of it around with you to every single next threat that's around the corner, right?
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about how we can self-regulate. How do we can't solve the external problems, and it doesn't sound like we can really even solve the internal problems, but we can, as you said, regulate kind of our response, and so that we can be in a rest and digest place.
You got it. Right.
So how?
Right. Well, and this is where it comes to those small actions, right? I mean, choosing a thing, whatever that is, that you can accomplish in a day, that is meaningful and purposeful to you, right? So this may not be like your work task list, right? This may be something in your own private space in your home, and I don't know if you have a garden, whatever that is, like something that you can see a beginning and a middle and an end to that matters to you. And it can be very small, right? But it's bringing that intention to what you're doing. You might be doing the thing already, right? But instead of thinking of it as another task, think of it as this is in my realm of control and this thing matters to me, right? And so then that really helps when so much might feel like, what's the point? When so much feels like I can't change or control that anyway, right? Bring that in small places. Do you have something that you do like that?
I do.
I saw your face like,
I do.
I have an idea. I know what this is.
I'm laughing so hard that you now know my idea face. No, I'm kind of laughing inside because what you're talking about is really personal awareness and being just more in touch with how you're feeling and what makes you feel in what way.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing because I'm thinking of every type A person that I know in my life. And on the DISC personality profile, I'm thinking of all the D personalities.
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically they are like the get it done.
Yeah. Overfunctioners. I have a problem. Let me fix it. Is that it?
Yep. I'm thinking about all you out there and they're like, what the hell? I got to be internally aware.
Right.
That's stupid. And so, they want to kill something and bring it home.
You got it.
Whereas this is totally opposite.
Well, you got it, right? Like in our caveman brains, like that's what closes the stress loop. Kill something, bring it home.
But you can't, because in our modern world, most of us aren't actually killing something and bringing it home. But whatever the modern version of that is,
Yes.
can't always be accomplished because of external factors. So I do
almost
think
like tricking the system into
Yeah.
like, see, it is kind of like you just killed something and brought it home, but we don't have to do that. Good news, right?
I don't know if that's going to fly with the type A's, but so to answer your question, I absolutely do. I love my plants. Like that's been, I've reached full crazy plant lady status.
Yes.
And they're psychotic, but I'm psychotic. They're not psychotic. If my plants are listening, I love you. But actually this is one of them behind us. So, so that's for me. And meditation
Yep.
and all of that. But I lean towards those things. And so I feel for my listeners and my viewers who that is not their normal. So your tip is kind of like, I like to call it an untip, because it's the person that's watching this or listening to this, taking notes. They're like, what do you mean?
But
I have to discover
what's my one
it.
thing to do, right? Yeah, and it's like, I wish that's how it was, right? But also it's so individualized and it's so specific. It's not a cookie cutter, okay, here's your step 1 through 5. But it's what is the activity or the task about, right? And it's about something that you can accomplish, that you can see the beginning and the middle and the end to, that directly relates to something that matters to you, right? Like the plants thing might not matter to all of your listeners. That may not have value and purpose to other people. To you, it deeply does. And that's why it's your thing, right? But if somebody just goes, oh, great. Okay, so let's go to Lowe's. I got to load up the trunk with a whole bunch of plants. And then they get home and it feels like another task to do because it's not their thing, right?
That sounds very personal example-y.
I'm learning. You're teaching me to not have a black thumb.
Okay, good. So as we wrap up, I know you have an event planned, but before we get into that, the event that will help people tap into that mindfulness and reach a sustainable habit of self-regulation. Is there anything else that you want to add about languishing or regulating?
I think that what is so important many times is to have a word for this. I think that many of us have gone, I don't really feel quite right. Maybe I don't feel as bad as I did in 2020, or maybe I feel better, or worse in some ways. But to have a word for it, I think is really powerful. And the other part is this isn't a new thing or a new term. It's been sort of brought into our awareness. Actually, there was a really great, in the spring New York Times article that outlined this and sort of brought it into mainstream awareness. But if you're feeling this, you're probably in the majority right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I had never heard of it until you were telling me about your event,
Right.
and then you said languishing, and then I saw someone post something on Facebook that said surge capacity.
Yes.
And then they explained, basically, I mean, I think surge capacity kind of explains itself, but
Right.
then I connected it with your word and thought, wow, I relate to this, and I think a lot of my listeners and viewers do too.
Right.
So that's why I was excited to talk about it. And I'm excited about, I don't know, I guess I'll even call it like a modality that you're
Sure.
making. You are
Right.
inventing.
We're creating it as
So
we go a little bit.
tell us about
Yeah.
this new thing.
Right. So we are Deshery McClure of Deshi, and I have partnered together to curate a full day of wellness. And our mentality of that is kind of, well, let's just say it, growing up self-care a little bit.
Yeah.
We have got to go a little bit beyond like the face mask and the glass of wine. Like those are great, but let's take it a little deeper. So we are putting together a full day of really building those self-care skills, and we're really thinking of it as from the inside out. And so it works like this. You come, you check in at 9 a.m. and it's like a work day on yourself from 9 to 5.
That's so
and
cool.
we're going to just guide you through it, right? We've got all sorts of experiences lined up that are really all mindfulness based. That's really the approach of every single thing that we're bringing to the day. All meals are included, so we'll have healthy meals. We'll be guiding in mindful eating practices, mindful walking, exercises. We will have cryotherapy on site to help with all of that stress that we like to carry around when we don't close the loops in our neck and shoulders. We'll have massage in that. Lots of guided self-reflection as well. So our thought is we want to give people a really, really elevated day of self-care, but with the idea that it doesn't end on that day. My vision for it is kind of a sampler platter of self-regulation strategies, and you choose which of those you kind of want to tuck in your back pocket and take home with you, because then next week, when that next threat is around the corner, you'll have something to pull out and help with that. So we're really excited to offer that, and really the vision for it has been there for a while, but seeing really this widespread languishing is what made us say, we have to do this now. This is the time people need this.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so brilliant, especially because we have such a hard time, we as people, I think women have, we always tend to put ourselves last, and feel bad if we do something for ourselves. But I don't think that's unique to women. I think men have a hard time too, that with taking time out to do these sorts of things. And there's also that decision fatigue. Like, what do I do? Do I need to research this? Who's the best practitioner for this practice? So
Absolutely.
what I love is it's all
Right.
in one spot,
Right.
and it's potentially giving them the tools to keep going. So this is in Pensacola for all of you that are listening or watching
Right.
and not here, but they could come and stay
Absolutely.
at the bed and breakfast that
Yep.
it's hosted
So
at.
it's going to be at Oyster Bay Boutique Hotel in downtown Pensacola. It's a beautiful location. Absolutely perfect for just the feel of what we want the whole day to be. So we're very grateful to have that partnership as well. Yeah.
And where can people see the dates of the different events that are going on?
So probably the easiest way is following on Instagram, Deshi, or Harbor Wellness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited, and I hope that people will get on board with your event and just be kind to themselves and on themselves in the area of self-regulation and languishing. So,
You got it. Kindness.
all right,
On
that's
that
a
note.
wrap.
Yeah.
Cool. Good job. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. I hope to see you next week too. I talk with the most interesting people that you've probably never heard of. Most of them are paradoxical and bring an opportunity for you to grow as a person. So if you like bright, meaningful entertainment, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.